Hello, it's day 8 of my training and today I'm going to do some opening prep. This time it's Budapest Gambit and it is rarely played these days, but you have to be prepared for every single option. And let's begin with Fajarovic's variation, which goes something like, just see. So d4, knight f6, c4, and now e5. This is the Budapest Gambit. And after white captures, knight e4 is Fajarovic's variation. And now white can play a3 to just not allow check on b4. And preparation for queen c2 next. And here black has a couple of options. One of them is b6. One is knight c6. Queen h4 as well. d6. Something in the spirit of Mora Gambit maybe. d6 and bishop c5. Let's begin with bishop c5. So after bishop c5 you have to play e3 to block the f pawn. And now you cannot play knight c6 because after queen d5 you lose a piece. So d6 should be the move, but still I think queen d5. Bishop d3 here. And this knight has to go back or just somehow to support it by bishop f5 and... But I believe that after this queen f3 is quite strong and it leaves your knight hopeless. I mean, you can't take on f2 because I take on f5 or with the bishop. It's just not working out. The knight is just going to stay there until death and it's over. g3 next, or that's bad. So after bishop d3 you have to go back to g5, which is not the best option. Knight g5, I can go even f4 and knight f3 next. Or even after this to go with b4 and always to have to meet d5 with c5. Okay, so let's not give too much attention to this. That's bishop c5. So let's first check out b6. Now we continue developing by knight f3, bishop b7, and now we try to kick this very strong knight by knight d2. And now a5. I guess you want to secure the outpost on c5 for the knight. Let's say something like this, and then even to push a4. Or maybe even potentially to go a4 immediately with rook a5. That could be interesting. And then knight a6, knight c5. to somehow target this pawn on e5. But let's see. Instead of a5, there is knight c5. But now we have b4, knight e6, and then bishop e2. Bishop e2. d6. Takes, and now g3. Bishop g2. We castle, and after a couple of more moves, whoops, rook, knight dc5, and he has a nice square on c5, but is it enough? If we go queen c2, queen e7, and then e3. Now we play rook fe1, rook ad1, knight d4 at some moment, and we make light squares quite weak after the trade of bishops. Okay, that's knight c5 on the move 6. So we had this. b6, knight f3, bishop b7, knight d2. And what happens if black takes on d2? Bishop d2. Now this. So he wants to capture on f3 and then take on e5, I guess. Or just knight c6. And now queen c2. So he doesn't care if this happens. I guess you open up the g file then and then go bishop c3, rook g1. If you take bishop c3, and now you have to keep an eye on the e file because queen e4 can happen. So queen e6, rook g1, maybe not, maybe just to play e3 and then rook g1. But that already looks a bit. Maybe you can go bishop h3 then. Let's see, bishop f3, gf, queen e5, now f4 with f5 next. Or if this, then bishop c3. Then bishop g2, and then a long castle. Okay, this is okay. This is really good. If g6 here, then bishop g5 and bishop f6 is a problem. Because then knight d4 comes and the queen is a bit stranded. So that's not gonna happen. Queen c2, knight c6 to recapture the pawn. And now we have this. Long castle. Queen e6, e3, bishop e7, and bishop e2. And white is just a clean pawn up. There's no compensation. Okay, let's go back here. A5. Now we took on e4, took, and bishop f4. And it says here that queen d4 is a bit dubious because black goes back. And then he has this maneuver, knight a6, knight c5, where the queen on d4 is awkward because of the potential fork. Okay, so we don't do that, we do bishop f4. We do that, and now knight a6. If black goes bishop e7, then e3, knight a6, bishop d3. And if he goes back, if he doesn't exchange, then we castle, knight c5 here, a4, knight d4. And that's better for white, because then I have queen g4 and knight f5 next, and this knight is very cute on c5, but it doesn't do anything. And if black trades on d3, which seems more logical, because then the b3 becomes weaker. So this queen c2, castles, a4, and now he achieves his plan to get to b3 to stop the queenside expansion, but for what cost? Now the d pawn is backward and white is much better. Okay, so after this, knight a6 was mentioned as the main move, and now g3. g3, queen c5, knight c5, queen c5, bishop g2, and now a4. So now he wants to play knight b3 and to trap the rook somehow, to get it to a2, which could be a bit unpleasant, so that's why we do rook c1 first, to meet knight b3 with rook c3, and it's a nice one. Rook c1, bishop e7, castles, and now knight d4. Takes, and f6. So we go first knight f3, and there's some couple of more moves, but rook cd1, queen d7, bishop c3, and white is much better. That was the b6 move. Let's go to knight c6. So we have to defend the pawn by knight f3, and now d6. For example, if you go a5 here, then queen c2. And if you go back, then knight c3, h6, bishop e3, knight e6, and now g3. You continue developing and you're just a pawn up. So after queen c2, d5 looks interesting, but after e3, bishop e6, knight d2, knight c5, and now you just finished development, castle, castle, and rook d1. Okay, the scheme is always something similar. You be a bit passive, and you are a bit passive, and then you slowly develop, and yeah, you catch up. So let's check the main move here, d6. d6, queen c2. Queen c2, and now d5. And does this work? Bishop f5? Oh, there is bishop f5 and it says it's not good, but let's check out first what happens on knight c5. Knight c5, we kick this knight away, we take on d6 and go bishop b2. Castle, and now e3. Like always, we develop, and black doesn't have enough compensation for the pawn. So we do that. That's knight c5. And bishop f5 looks interesting because now black wants to go knight g3 next. But now we go here. Knight c3. And now if knight takes, queen f5, knight a4 to escape, g3, bishop e7, queen c2, knight c5, and then b4 again. Yeah, it's always the same. The same scheme. When they don't play a5, I play b4 and bishop b2, and I get the control. And what happens if knight g3? Well, then e4 is very good. And now if you take the rook, I take it. But wait, first they mention bishop e4. Bishop e4, knight e4, knight h1, and the knight is just simply doomed on h1. Now bishop g5. Bishop e7 takes, ed cd, and now castle. Followed with bishop d3 and grabbing this knight. Okay, so after e4, knight h1, and now we take d5. Also, this recapture doesn't change much because we take this and go bishop e3. Queen h4, g3. Wait, no. Bishop e3, queen h4, castle, yeah. Bishop e7, and now bishop d3. And if you take it, then knight d5 is very strong. And then this. Aha, so you want to give a check and to chase the king somehow. So this, king f8, queen b4. Aha, you take on b7, yeah. Take on b7 and it's winning. So that's why this recapture doesn't work. But let's capture with d pawn and again bishop e3, but this time you cannot castle that easily. Bishop e7. Rook d1, queen c8, and now knight d5. But now the plan is to go g3, bishop g2, and to take the knight. So you can play whatever here. You can go bishop e2, king f1, king g1, and just make a castle. There's no problem about this position. Okay, so where was I? We were here. Bishop f5 was played. Knight c3, and the next option is knight takes f2. At least now you capture the pawn. You lose the bishop anyways, so why not ruin the king side a bit? But after this, there is e6. Still, black's knight cannot escape, so it's good enough for white. Now if he takes, well, if he goes queen e7, then we can exchange all this. And then go g3, bishop g2, and again take this unfortunate knight. So if f e6, then queen e6, queen e7, and now queen d5. Aha, so we want to go bishop g5, g3, bishop g2, and eventually take this knight. Okay, that's very reasonable. And let's go back to the main line. The main line is this one. Let's go back. d6. Oh no. d6, queen c2, and now d5. And now we go e3. We're just calm and we develop. But black isn't. Black has to do something quickly, and he goes bishop g4. If he goes bishop e6, then we defuse the situation by knight d2. Takes on d2. We can take this and go bishop c3 next. Defend this pawn, and it's just an extra pawn. Even though it's doubled, it's extra pawn. So what do you do here? e3. Okay, let's see what happens on bishop f5 right now. So we save against this discovery because now there's d5. We cannot play e4 anymore. So we have to play this. bishop g6, and now again knight d2. The same tactic. We exchange the knight on e4, and that's how we get freedom. Knight d2, this one, dc, take on g6, take, queen c4, and again bishop c3, rook d1, and we have a better position. Because of this extra pawn, there is nothing special. So that was that, but bishop g4 should be searched. And now we take queen d5, bishop c4, queen a5, and now knight d2. This is interesting because you allow, well, you have to allow doubling on f3, but you're not afraid because you will have a bishop pair. Wait, there is something very interesting here. b4. And now bishop b4 take the rook, queen e4. That could also be quite interesting. But maybe there's no need to complicate in a position where you are better just by playing normal moves without being too extravagant. So let's just go here. And yeah, now black tries to ruin the structure by bishop f3. For example, if knight d2, then there is bishop d2. And after this, just b4, queen e7. Now bishop a6. You can't even castle because of queen c6. That's nice. So if you do this, boom. And also around here, after b4, you cannot go to b6 because there's bishop f7 and then queen c4 collecting the bishop. After this, knight g5. Okay, so this was played, and now bishop f3. gf, take it, and now finally black got his pawn. Yay. Also, if you go bishop b4 here, then just castle long, take, queen e5, and again there's this tactic, bishop a6. Okay, that's good to know. So this one, now bishop c3. I have two bishops. I don't have the extra pawn, but I don't need it because black is so bad here. His only positional trump is that his pawn structure is good, but my bishops are going to disagree with that. They're gonna be like, give me that pawn structure to ruin it. Also, rook g1 might come at some point, and black's structure will be more and more inflexible. Inflexible, is it the word? Maybe not. Never mind. So yeah, that's a pretty good position. So let's go back. Here we have e5 takes, knight e4, a3, and now let's check queen h4. Queen h4 with the very simple idea to checkmate the opponent, and that's why we played g3. Queen goes back to h5, and now we just develop. We allow capturing the pawn back, but now we have a very comfortable development, and that's also important. Knight f3, and now what's the best square for the queen? If it goes to f6, we go here. Knight c5, knight c3. Oh, that's very bad. Castle, knight c6, knight d5, queen d8, b4, bishop b2, and you dominate this position. Bishop on b2 is a monster, knight on d5 is a monster. Too many monsters in the position to survive. Where else to go? Queen c5, let's say. And you don't have to defend the pawn, you can just go castle, and after queen c4, bishop f4, and have some compy. Bishop f4 with some initiative. Knight e5 comes next. Black has to go back to f6, and then I go knight c3, rook c1, and knight e5. It's really, really bad. But also there's this thing mentioned. After queen c5, knight d4. Attack the knight. So if you go back to d6, there's bishop d5, and now apparently the queen is trapped. You can do it by b4 and c5, and it's a huge threat. Knight c4, then just go back. Here, queen a6, queen d4, knight d6, and this one with some attack. So this is why knight d6 is bad. And what's better? This one, but you have bishop a3, and you should be good. Okay, so where to go with the queen? If it goes to a5, then knight bd2. Now you can't go bishop c5 because of this, because of b4, and now if you take on f2, then just king f1, and both queen and knight on e4 are under attack. And what's even more important is that the bishop on f2 hangs after you capture the knight. So after bishop c5, which is very bad, now we play b4, and if black takes, now we just capture and take on e4. And that's it. Where to go? b7, but then the bishop is very stupid on f8. Castle d6, knight d4, c6, and now b4. g6 here, and now you cannot go bishop g7 because of knight c6. So you have to go back with the knight. Knight c3, bishop g7, now b5 to provoke c5 and weakening the d5. Yeah, this is horrific. And finally, they mentioned that queen h5 is the best move here, the best square, the least risky. And after this, to go back, knight c3, and now d6. We go there, h4, castle, long castle, and just attack on the king side. And the last move, after d4, knight f6, c4, e5, d5, knight e4, a3, is d6. Now we just develop by knight f3. Now they go bishop f5. No, there is something mentioned here with this, but it cannot work. Come on. We take knight e5, bishop e6, e3. Bishop d6, knight f3, and we slowly stabilize. Knight d2, bishop e2, and the extra pawn is there. So let's check this out. Now we go g3. Knight c6. If h5, this knight c6, knight d4. That's nice. This, and now we get, play this here, and now b4 first. Knight e6, bishop b2, f6, and now we take here. And if I move the bishop back to e4, let's say, then there's bishop c5, which might cause some issues, but you can just take on a7. So let's go back to knight c6. Now idea is to force capture on d6 and then to get the bishop out for free. To get the bishop from f8. But now there is knight h4. And we go bishop e6. They go bishop e6, no, not we. We will never play this. Bishop d7, bishop... If bishop d7, then bishop g2. This, and now b4. Again, the same idea goes. We take, bishop b2. Castles, knight f3, and... we have a decent control. So after bishop e6, bishop g2, we give up the pawn because we take the knight, right? Black plays f5 because what else? If you go knight c5, I do the same. b4, knight d7, take, and now first knight d2 to defend the pawn. Castle, a5, b5, and then he gets to e5, but I go bishop b2. And again, this knight on c5 is somewhat cosmetic over there and not doing quite much. So this, and knight f6. And now we go b3 first. Then bishop b2, and we slowly develop. Queen d7. If queen d7 now, then there's knight c3, castle, oops, castle, and knight d5. So maybe it's better to go for d5 immediately and then capture. Oh, they exchange queens. Nice. Nice. This, and what the hell is this? Yeah, it's much better. It's a much better position. Okay, that was Fajarovic's Gambit. Let's now go to the main line of Budapest Gambit. And it's this one. This, and knight g4. So the issue with knight e4 was that it wasn't putting pressure from the beginning on the e5 pawn. But knight g4 could cause slightly bigger issues to white, I suppose. Now we answered like this. And again, black has several options. The first one is bishop b4 check. The second one is knight c6, and the third one bishop c5. Actually, these two are the main moves, knight c6 and bishop c5. But let's first check bishop b4, which is supposed to be dubious. Now we go here. We're not afraid of doubling the pawns. Oh no. So if black takes bc and goes queen e7, now we go queen d4. Queen d4, and but wait, what happens if I go knight c6? Ah, then bishop g5. And then you need to go f6, and then I take, and continue with g3 and developing. That's nice. So bc, queen e7. But now this allows queen d4, like I said. Queen d4, and now black has to play either f5 or h5. If he goes f5, then bishop f4, knight c6. This one, go there, and rook c1. And then you kick the knight away by h3, and you're good. You are good. And if h5, then bishop f4, knight c6, queen d5, f6. Takes, queen d3 back, and then again I think we go g3 and we castle. But h5 is a bit stupid there because it weakens just about everything on the king side. G6 square, G5. So that can't be good for black. So this is actually why bishop c3 is not so good. And let's see other options. If knight c6, then we go bishop f4. No. We go bishop g5. And if bishop b7, then bishop f4, because now the queen cannot get to e7. So we have time for h3 and to kick this knight away. Okay, so after knight c3, queen e7. What's up with that? Bishop d2 just. And now it's the most principle to capture the pawn. Knight e5, and not to go like this because of this checkmate, which might be a problem. Just to capture and go a3. And now if he doesn't capture, if he goes bishop c5, then there's knight d5 followed with bishop c3. Followed by. And yeah, this is a must. Bishop c3, queen g5. And now we go chase the queen and go rook h3. Now if black castles, rook g3, f6, queen d5 here, and h5. Aha, we want to go bishop d2. Wow. What a nice move. So actually here d6 looks better, but not too much. Bishop e6, queen b3, b6, and now g3 with bishop g2 castling long, and black is almost busted. So that's bishop b4, that's that weak variation. So let's go back to the main lines. And let's check out knight c6. Let's check it out. We defend the pawn by bishop f4, and now black gives a check. We go there. And now black has f6 as an option. Queen e7 is an option. Let's check it. Let's check f6 first. So the idea is to force me to capture an f6, take on f6, and attack the bishop and the pawn on b2. But white's like, okay, take it, and queen f6. e3, queen b2, bishop e2, and now d6. Black got the pawn. I mean, got the pawn back. And here, in case he castled right away, White castles, d6. There's c5. So what happens there? If you take with the bishop, well, first let's check out what happens if dc. If dc, then knight c4. And then the bishop is kind of stuck on b4. So what, bishop c3 now? What's up with that? Oh, then you what? If this, rook c1. And then this is stuck. Pretty much. And if bishop a5 takes knight g5. h6. Because if you go back to e5, then there is check on d5. Knight f7, and now this nice shot. After this, queen c5, both rook and knight hang. So after h6, queen d5, here, go here, takes, knight c5, and pair of bishops is good enough. Also after c5 in this case. So let's just go back to repeat. We have this, bishop knight c6, bishop f4, bishop knight bd2, f6, takes, e3, queen b2, bishop e2, and now castles, d6, c5. If d5, then we take the pawn and it's over. Because if you take on c5 now, then I have knight b3 and take on d5 next. So that's not gonna work out. And after c5, bishop c5, then knight g5. And now h6. Wait, here there's something interesting. Rook f4 is bad because after this, bishop f2. But what's the point? Even if you take on f2, what's... Maybe you want to go knight d4 next, or... But you just go here. Just go here, and if this, bishop c4, check. Followed by queen h5. Okay, so after knight g5, h6. Also, I guess that knight f6 is very bad because of trapping the queen. After knight c4, and you cannot get this queen out. Queen b5 is just too bad. Enters some discovered attacks. Queen c3, rook c1. So yeah, this is just not working out. So that's why h6, but now give a check. King h8, knight f7. And if king h7, then just h3. Knight e5, takes. Takes, rook b1, queen c3, rook b3, queen a5, takes, and finally this. That's nice. But here, after knight f7, you capture like this, but even then, black doesn't have sufficient compensation after this. Bishop d5, and it's an exchange for a pawn. So let's go back. Bishop e2, d6 was played. Now I castle and knight g5. If black goes back to f6, then again there's c5, followed by knight c4. So you cannot capture with the bishop because knight c4 traps the queen. Also, dc is not better. So that's why black has to play d5. But now I take on c7. And if bishop c5, then rook c1. Here, queen b4, knight e5. And you play against this weak pawn. Isn't this lovely? So after this, bishop f5 seems more dynamic. And now queen b3. Oh, I like this. Queen b3. And then you force the trade. Knight b3. Castle, knight fd4, and you have some advantage. Because you're a pawn up, and also you have the blockade on the d4. That's always cool. Also here, if bishop f5 to somehow choke the queen. Then again c5. And wait, if you go bishop c5, aha, then there is this, because there's no pressure on the d2. This rook b1 takes. Oh, this is just horrible. You can't even castle because rook c7 comes. Okay, so after c5, bishop c2. And now queen c1. So now black captures. Although here there's also bishop a3. Wait, what? Bishop a3, cd, cd. Aha, so you give up the exchange to take two pawns. But wait, if you go here, what happens? Knight b1. Bishop c1 here, here, and knight b5 wins material. And on queen c1, if you play bishop a3, cd, and you take back, and then knight c4. And then you get bunch of pawns for the exchange. Okay, but the best is to take like this, take, and knight c4. And the bishop pair is also always a good thing to have. Well, almost always. And let's go back to the main line. So the main line is this, knight g5. And again c5. So now if you take with the bishop, knight e5. And of course now you capture with the knight, because if you take with the pawn, there is some trapping going on here. After queen c3, rook c1, a3, and it's over. So actually knight e5 is better. Do this, queen a3, takes, and give a check. So in general, knight e5 is much worse. Bishop c5 is much worse. If you take with the deep one, then knight e5. If knight e5, then knight e4. Knight f7, bishop c4. But if you take on d2, what happens then? Bishop b5. Takes. Bishop c3, rook a c1. Oh, now the c7 pawn hangs. And also c5. Okay. So after this, knight f3 was the best. Now we take, and bishop c5, bishop c4. Now there is some threat like queen d5 coming next. Bishop f5 first. To just meet queen d5 with the rook f8, I guess. And now knight h4. Bishop e4. Also, if you go bishop d7 back, bishop g5 comes. And now queen h5 is a threat, because there's no king d8. And if knight e5, then rook b1 here, this g6 and then queen h6 just with queen g7 next. That's not good. So bishop e4, queen g4, stopping the castling. And now after d5 you take on d5. Ah, yeah, there's this check. Miracle. And in case of castling, what happens? In case of castling, knight f5. Okay, so after this, queen b5, castle, knight f3. And now two pawns are under attack, b7, c7. So you cannot defend them both in this case. And black chose this one, but it seems a bit awkward. Aha, now if you do this, there's bishop c4. Followed by rook a b8. That's interesting. So you go first rook fd1, and if rook ab1, ab8, knight g5. And you might even go to e4, c5 and put pressure on the pawn. And yeah, that's good enough for me. That's better. And this was f6 move. After d4, knight f6, c4, e5, d5, knight g4, knight c6, bishop f4, bishop b4, knight d2. Now let's check queen e7. And now we just give up the pawn with e3 move. Black takes, 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 and we go bishop e2. Black's plan usually is to go bishop d2 takes and go a5, a4, trying to damage the queenside pawn structure. And wow, now there are 5, 6 moves for black. There's d6. There's b6. There's capture. There's castle. And there's a5. And also there is one more queen d6, which is considered to be a worse option. And let's check that. Let's check it out first. So we play a3. It takes. We exchange and we have the bishop pair. Also, we can play c5 next and somehow make these pawns backward. If d6 now, then we can go c5 anyways. And if knight g6, this, take, bishop c7. White has a clear edge. After a big pause. So after this, f6, c5, b6, rook ac1, king d8, rook hd1. And again, white has a bishop pair, so you cannot doubt about advantage. And let's go back here and let's check out d6. d6, castle. And now there's bishop d7 or castling for black. If you castle, then this is very interesting because now the bishop will get captured after a3 and you cannot go to a5 or c5 because you capture. So if black goes b6, then I go a3 here and just capture. Now you cannot take with the d pawn because of queen d5, so this one, and now b4. Okay. And this is much better for white. And after bishop d7, what happens? What happens? What happens? a3, take it. Take it. Wait, if you go bishop c5, knight e4, bishop b6, and now sorry, bishop c6, and then you go here with knight e5 next. Okay, so black takes, queen takes, f6, b4, and now castle. Also, what happens if rook d8? Rook d8, bishop h5, knight f7 back, and then c5. This one, oh, rook fc1, dc5, and then this. And now you cannot capture on b4 because c7 hangs. And if you go c4, I go a4 and then take on c4. No, wait, I mixed up variations here. I mixed them up. No, after this, bishop b5, rook fd1. So this is out. Rook fd1, and if d4, then d5, then e4. And yeah, you cannot capture like this because you lose the knight. Okay, so here also h5 is interesting. Very interesting. Now we go e4. Now if g5, then bishop e3, knight g4, and bishop d4. We keep these bishops on the board, and it's very good. And if h4 now, then f3, h3, and now g4. Castles, and now b5. And now we just attack on the queen side. Okay, but let's check the castle first. The third. Now we go e4. And this actually either gives up the bishop pair or gives up the e4 pawn, because now black can play knight g6. And we don't care. Bishop e3. Queen e4 and f3. f3. Go here. But if he goes there, rook fe1. What do we do? King b8, a4. This. Bishop f1 to have bishop a7 at some point. So that's why this happens. Queen f2, and then once black pushes one of his pawns, then I use them as a hook and I open it up easily. So let's go here, back. Here, king b8. Now a4. a5. How do you stop this? Or you don't? Bishop d3, bishop e4, and then a6. Wow, this is just crashing. Okay, the next variation is b6. After all these trades on e5, bishop e2. Now let's see what happens on b6. We castle, and now bishop d2. And the reason why Let's say black delays. Capture on d2. Now we use this to go knight b3. Knight b3 and now a5. And if he castles, a3, bishop c5. Knight c5, bc5, and again b4. Like in the previous example. But if I go a5, a3, bishop c5, takes, again b4. Oh. Ah, because of this tactic on a1, you attack the bishop and the knight. f6, takes, and queen d4 to fix the structure. Okay, so you need to capture on d2. You need to. And now c5. Wow. c5. So what's the purpose? If you take with the queen, rook c1 comes and you have some initiative. So you need bc. And now this. Oh, knight g6. And what happens if d6? Takes d5 because of queen b5 check. And now rook ac1. Now you take on c5 and black is busted. If f6, then rook ac1, d6, and now b4 even. If you take rook c7, and it's really good. Okay. So this is why knight g6 is the most critical line. We go back. We don't capture, because after this there is some counterplay. If you go f3, then there is queen g5 and plenty of complications appear. So yeah, just bishop g3 and we'll take this pawn later, maybe. So now d6 is played, but what happens? I'm intrigued. What happens if h5? Now we take bishop c6 and now bishop d6, queen g5 and e4. Ah, if you take, then bishop f3. Wow, that's nice. So white plays b4, And now black has to capture, because if you don't, then I take on c5 take, put the rook on c1 and break the structure. So let's take it. Rook a c1 and now c6. Rook c8 is worse because of capturing. Bishop a8, rook fd1, castles, and now bishop a6. You lose the c7 pawn. Okay, so after c6, queen b4, rook d8. Because if you go c5, then I give a check, and after this bishop d6 just wins. Rook d8, rook fd1, attacking still, and now there is d5. Black kept the pawn, but it's a very bad position, very positionally bad. Now rook d4. Now we don't even care if he exchanges queens. Castles, takes, and now rook a4. Now what happens if rook a8? Bishop d6 maybe, huh? Bishop d6, rook e8, rook b1, bishop c8. I know, but you can at least go bishop a6 first to begin with, or bishop d6, take on e7, bishop a6, and then you okay, let's check. Let's check what happens then. Bishop d6. Okay, this. And now some h3, some waiting moves, but I don't like them. Can you afford this? h3 first, and then nothing concrete. Quite interesting. I have to check it out later, but not on the video. Black plays here a6, rook b4, rook d7, and now bishop d3. And this is the end. White is much better because black is so passive, and even though he's a pawn up, you cannot really achieve much. So let's go back. We were here. Takes, bishop e2, and now let's check bishop d2. Bishop d2, queen d2, d6, and now let's castle, castle. So now as white we want to prepare c5 break. And it's not so tough to prepare this. We go b4. We go b4 and black goes rook d8. To anticipate c5 by just capturing. If he went for rook e8, rook fd1, knight g6. After this there is a5, c5. So what, if you take on c5 twice? Ah, you take on a5 maybe, or no, you take like this. And what happens on queen c5? Oh yeah, you take on c7. What am I? I'm not in the shape. If bishop is e6, then this, and you want to go c5. But if he does this, well, you still go. You still go with c5 and take bishop f7, a4, and you have some pressure on the queen side. You can go a5 and claim advantage. Also here, b4, if b6, then it just encourages c5, and after this, cd, a4. The d pawn is the real target, and white has a very nice position without any risk. But here black can go rook d8 to somehow slow down c5, but I can go queen c3, prepare a bit more, double on the d file, and black really has no counter attack. Okay, let's now check out castles. After this, so we have a d4, knight f6, c4, e5, takes knight g4, knight f3, knight c6, bishop f4, bishop b4, knight d2, queen e7, and now we give up the pawn like always. And now let's castle. Castle, and now a5. a5, and now we go a3, and he takes it. If he tries to keep the bishop by bishop c5, then I guess knight e4 is very good. No, b4. Oh yeah, b4. This, and now knight g6. If you take on b4, what happens? Bishop e5, bishop d2, bishop g7. Okay, so here we take on c7, he takes on e3. Fe, here, rook f2, here, queen d1. And black is a pawn up. But we have a bishop pair. So we claim that we have enough to compensate for this. Wait, this is okay for white. Oh. Yeah, because of this bishop on c8, which is quite sad. Bishop f3 comes next, and I might even go bishop d6 at some point and just play b5, b6, and yeah. So takes. Let's check that out. Now d6. But what happens if a4 happens? Well, then c5. Easy play. And you cannot capture on c5 because rook ac1 loses the pawn on c7. So what do you do? Well, that's the end. The d-pawn is fixed, so you either go d6 and weaken the d-pawn, or you just keep the bishop on c8. Safe. Okay, so this d6, b4, rook e8, and now rook fc1, and we have some pressure. We have some pressure. And the final move of this whole line, I guess, is a5. a5. And now we castle. Wonder. Now d6, and now knight b1. This is very clever. You avoid the trade of knight, and once you push the bishop away with a3, you go to c3, d5, and try to provoke c6. That's quite nice. Now castle by black. But what happens if you go a4? a4, a3, and now you have to go to c5 and knight c3. Bishop d7, knight d5, queen d8. And now you are annoying, because you have the knight on d5, and what do you do? Castle, rook a d1. What happens? If you go c6, like I said, you weaken the d6 pawn, and also this capture on bishop c6, bishop d5. White would just take with the rook, not with the pawn, because if you take with the pawn, you can imagine that black can somehow hold the queen side because there's a4 pawn, which is quite a nice blockader. But you take with the rook and still you can organize some attack on the a4. But here black can castle as well. This, knight c3 and bishop e6. And now let's see what happens if c6 is played. Queen c2, knight g6. Bishop g3 and now f5. Interesting. This f4 and just take it. G6 and now rook a e1. We have an edge because of the structure. The queen side has double pawns and we have the extra pawn on the king side, so that's basically it. And after bishop e6 we go b3, knight g6, bishop g3, f5, and now queen d2 to stop f4 and also to prepare doubling. Now we can go knight a4, rook fd1, rook ac1 as well. So yeah, that's also quite good for me, for white. Let's see, queen f7, knight a4, bishop a7, bishop f3, c6, and now wait, why do I have to put pressure like this? Why don't I just capture? Oh, let's see. Let's see, why not? If you do this, rook d7, no. Maybe this? No. Wait, queen d6. Maybe there's f4. Maybe there's that. So queen d6, f4, and if you take like this, I can trap the queen because now there's no bishop on the long diagonal. The pawn is blocking it, so the queen is trapped. And if you take with the bishop, I think I have something like bishop b8 first. When the queen moves, let's say to d3, then I take queen f4 and I attack on h2. And you cannot play g3 because the bishop hangs. So that's possibly a reason why it doesn't work. Let me check with the engine. Yeah, f4. And it could be missed very easily in the game. f4, bishop f4, bishop b8, rook fd8 first. But why? Queen c7? This, queen a5. Oh, you take and then you have bishop f2. Oh, but what's the remedy for this? Queen d4. Okay. But anyways, queen d6 is bad, so you got to play rook fd1 or yeah, rook fd1. Although it says here it's bad for black. There's knight e5. and then g5. So maybe here rook a d1, it says like this, and if knight e5, this g5 f4, but what's the difference? Maybe you have the rook to get to e1. Okay, that's very interesting. Let's keep it as a main line like this, and I'm gonna fix it later on. And that's all about the fourth move, knight c6. And let's now check bishop c5. Bishop c5. Now we gotta play e3, knight c6, knight c3, and now castles. If black takes on e5 straight away, we do this, and f4. Now the knight has to get to c6 or g6, let's say c6. We develop, we castle, we play a3, a5, and just bishop d2, queen f3, not like this, queen f3, rook a e1, and we batter. Okay, so after f4, knight g6, what happens then? Bishop d3, castles, d6. And again, bishop d2, bishop d7, king h1, to have e4 on the next move, reasonably. And wait a second, what's this? This says black has counterplay, but what happened? Aha, here bishop e2 leads to the main line, and f4 is a bit dubious. Okay. So after this, castles, bishop e2. Now black takes, and white castles. And again, three choices by black. For black, first one is d6, second one is a5, and the third one is rook e8. Okay, let's check out d6. We go b3, and now queen h4. Queen h4, now we go bishop b2, knight g4, and now we go h3, knight f6, and we have to be careful about the Greek gift maybe with bishop h3, but not Greek gift, but sack on h3. So we go here, rook e8, and now knight b5, targeting the pawn, rook e7, and now bishop d4. And now the bishop on f3 dominates the bishop on c8, so because of that we are better. And let's check out a5. a5, we go b3, and now d6. Also here, rook a6 looks interesting to get the rook to g6 or h6. But now we have f4, and now the knight will interfere with the rook. Knight g6, king h1, rook e8, and now e4. And with the knight on g6, rook on a6 has no meaning. After, oh wait, b6 now. Yeah, you have to develop the bishop, but you cannot get rook to f6 now, or to g6. So you play b6, and look at this. You fianchetto the bishop on b7, but rook is on a6 for some reason. And now f5 is very strong. And you follow it up with f6. And yeah, that's very dangerous for sure. So you don't play rook a6, it's quite strange. The idea is good, but when you kick the knight to g6, to the 6th rank, the whole idea becomes clumsy. So bishop b2, rook e8, queen c2. And now bishop d7. Rook a d1. And again, the knight jumps to d5. If it provokes c6, then okay, you put pressure on d6. And again, white is slightly better. Maybe slightly is too calm, but yeah, he's better for sure. And the last variation, I guess. The last one is rook e8. So let's go back a bit. This, knight g4, knight f3, bishop c5, e3, knight c6, knight c3, castles, bishop e2, takes, castles, and rook e8. And now we go b3. With the pawn on e3, we have to go b3, so that's quite logical. We go bishop b2, queen c2, rook a d1, and we jump to d5. Sometimes even to e4 or a4. And now black goes a5. So the idea is again to go rook a6 to transfer the rook to the king side and to generate some attack. And there are other moves. Here d6 looks like the most logical. Besides a5. And now bishop b2. And now if you try with this rook, now g3. Now there is no queen h4 jump. It's not easy to double heavy pieces on the h file. Let's say if you try rook h6, let's see how it goes. Rook h6, knight e4, queen d7, and now you go even h4. You go h4 and then you stop any counterplay. And after g3, if you go a5, you just stop the expansion. Then there is queen c2. And after this, you just play rook fd1 and On queen d7 there's queen e4 with queen g2. So if black goes bishop g4, you take and you go queen f5. So knight takes h2, and after this you go rook h1, and the knight on h2 is quite unhappy. So black has to play this. Queen e4, rook e6, take, knight g4 back. But after this queen c6, white is much better because of these weak pawns on the queen side. So that's about d6, which seems like the most logical move here. And let's check out a5. So after a5 we have knight a4. The alternative jump besides d5 and d4. And now bishop f8. He goes there. He doesn't go to a7 because he might need his bishop on the king side to defend. Because if you go bishop a7, yeah, there's c5 as well. c5, and then you block completely the bishop. So this looks less risky, and now f4. Using the fact that there's no bishop on the a7 g1 diagonal, you can play f4 without any fear. And now knight g6. And now we go queen d3 before we go bishop b2 to defend the e3 pawn. Now black continues with d6. Knight goes back because it did the job, pushing the bishop to f8. And after this e4, white is still better because of spatial advantage. And yeah, he's just going to play bishop b2, maybe rook a d1, and even launch an attack on the king side.